have three artists who are who we were familiar with their work. With some of them, we were actually collaborating multiple times. Ibuki, this is like fourth show that we created with Ibuki. And she really brings every time such a mind-blowing artworks, and we're so grateful for that. And also we were familiar with two other artists we documented multiple times. Chen's work, and this is the first collaboration with Jennie. So.
Yeah, so we have the three artists here today. We have Jennie E. Park, who did the piece at the front of the show. It's called Do It Yourself DIY Political Machine, and you should definitely take some time to engage and play with it, and Jennie will explain to you some of the elements of that, but that was really one of the first pieces that when we were thinking about an arcade, that it was like knowing Jennie's work and really enjoying seeing it, like the video production that she's made of that piece. We were like, we really want to have that element in the show, again, because it's a device, it's technology, but it also has these underlying social political themes. We have Chenhung Chen, who did this beautiful wire sculpture behind the wall there that is spilling onto the floor with all kinds of the electronic waste that we are just flooded with in this world. And when you think about how much disposable technology there is being thrown away every day, at least there are artists who are looking at that and figuring out ways to create amazing and stunning works of art with that in a sculptural level. It was also important to have something that was unplugged in the show, and that, there's a couple of pieces that, like Chenhung's, that are unplugged, but to admire and that deal with technology. And then third, we have Ibuki Kuramochi, who did the VR experience right there with the eggscapes. And she will explain more about all of her body of work in the virtual realm. But we're going to start off first with Jennie to give a presentation, and then we'll do, for each of them, we'll do a short Q&A, and then at the end of Ibuki's presentation and Q&A, we'll do a group Q&A where you can ask questions to any and all of us. Okay? So we're gonna, yes.
Okay, yeah, so I just wanted to thank Studio Gentlemen for hosting this show. I think it's a relatively high maintenance show for a visual art show with literally so many moving parts and so many quirks per piece. And I believe Jamie was like a superhero, continuing to manage and monitor and fix all of the things from day to day. So we're really appreciative of her especially. And thank you also to Jason and Vojislav for including me in this show. Vojislav I just met through this show, but Jason, I think, was one of the first people to notice anything that I was doing in art at all when I was in grad school about 4 years ago at Cal Arts doing an MFA. And I really appreciate what I perceive to be his openness and enthusiasm to supporting all different kinds of artists and artwork, whether you're like a 16-year-old illustrator or a 60-year-old conceptual artist or anything in between or beyond. I feel like he gets energized by all of that, and that kind of like expansive and yet still kind of thoughtfully considered and curated inclusivity is something that I've always gravitated toward in my own curatorial as well as art practice as well. So I appreciate resonating with that. Okay, so I guess I should have done this first. Or I should have done this. Okay, so since we don't have that much time in this presentation, I'm just going to breeze through an overview of my overall practice. So here is my condensed artist statement and bio. So I am a South Korean-born, Southern California-based, first-generation American immigrant artist, writer, and arts programmer, committed to interdisciplinarity and integrated approaches to honesty. So with respect to interdisciplinarity, I actually started grad school in art at the age of 40. So before then, I was in grad school for a couple other things, experimentalist cognitive psychology, and then I went to law school as well. So, and then my undergrad degrees were completely unrelated to art. So basically all of those different tools and methods and questions and technologies kind of make their way indirectly or directly into my artwork. So invisibility and invulnerability and world-generating dynamics of entanglement and truthful paradox recur as practices, tools, or puzzles I explore through my mixed media project-based work. So the next few slides are just going to be images of a body of work that I created between 2021 and 2023. And it's probably going to be difficult to perfectly map how I'm describing them onto the images because I just have to kind of click through them quickly. In recent sculpture and installation work, I explored interrelationships among the energies of the erotic, the neutral, and the generic as I experienced them growing up as an immigrant. So I interpreted Audre Lorde's erotic, so she was a Black feminist, poet, activist, etc. I interpreted her theorizing of the erotic through my own work as a kind of soul-generated, embodied, but often suppressed personal knowing or desire that intends, through its expression, to create bridges or shared spaces rather than to create separation. And then I interpreted Roland Barthes' neutral, and Roland Barthes was a French philosopher. I interpreted his idea of the neutral as modes of aliveness outside of binary or oppositional paradigms that playfully escape being fixed or fixedness. And I interpreted the concept of the generic as a kind of tacit, hegemonic, and bland anchor of normative reality. And as the word generic stems from genus or type, I was conscious of culturally specific, that is, what I perceived to be American and Korean types of generics growing up, particularly in the form of mass-produced household objects that in their bare basic forms and contours delineated each culture's material center of gravity. So in these works, basically different kinds of generic objects. Sometimes there's culturally specific generic objects, so like what I consider generic American items, generic Korean items. Sometimes they're more generic in another sense. They served as kind of base registers or carriers of my personal thoughts or feelings. And my integration of all of these energies is more searching and exploratory than kind of following the formula. So again, I know it's hard to map the images probably onto what I said without me going into detail, but if you're truly curious about any of these individual pieces, you can go to my website where I've written about all of them. And I think I've been told for visual artists I over-describe my work verbally. Well, it helps some people. So this is a piece made out of cash register receipt paper called Say On To Registers. That was part of a group show last year at the Brand Library and Art Center. This is a set of hammocks made with Korean style spoons with the skinny long handles and then like Western style spoons. That's been in a few different shows throughout California. This is another diptych using Korean and what I consider to be Korean and American generic style kitchen items with words that are placed on them that have like a conceptual resonance that I developed throughout my childhood, I guess, as an immigrant growing up in a small suburb of upstate New York. And then finally, this is another sculpture from that body of work that uses kind of an everyday mechanics tool called a feeler gauge that you can get at Harbor Freight for like $5. And each of the blades are really, really thin. They're like a fraction of a millimeter thick. And with that, I explored primarily in this piece the energy of like the neutral and kind of getting between these oppositional binary, black-white spaces, and can we find other more subtle, liminal, unspoken spaces or feelings? So those are the recent works from the past couple of years. And then in terms of work in progress, just a brief summary. So I'm primarily engaged in a community-based, socially engaged narratives project that's being supported by the California Creative Corps artist grant that's provided by the California Arts Council and that I received through Arts Council for Long Beach. And I'll probably continue to develop this project for years and years, maybe the rest of my life. But anyways, just a broad overview, it will involve, or it is involving, adults who identify as Asian, Pacific Islander in Southern California, particularly in regions noted as the most under-resourced in the California Healthy Places Index. And so it'll be a kind of a census, but putting together lots of different components of our lived experience that are typically not considered together. And then finally, in current sculpture work, I'm exploring materials that have enabled interdependencies among the concepts and the energies of healing, discipline, and the average. And so the average and the generic to me are conceptually, materially related. And then healing and discipline I see as like two sides of the same coin. They're both trying to correct something that's wrong. And both of them in trying to correct an aberration tend to, like we, especially in the West, have developed this notion that there's like an average statistic that indicates that something is actually in good condition. So what's the, am I sick? Well, what's the average person's health like? So we think about the average in calibrating healing and discipline. So anyway, so that's what I'm working on. So I'm going to spend the rest of this time, I think maybe just like 5 or 7 more minutes, talking about the piece that's in this show. So the piece that's in the front, the little sculpture, the kinetic sculpture, is actually one of a series of 3 that's included in this work that I call DIY Political Machines, Circular to Linear Motion. And the drawing that you see there is actually, I guess I call it a technical drawing. I've never gone to I've never had any kind of training in technical drawing, so this is just my way of describing it. But basically, it's like an offering of all of the measurements. It's a 2-scale drawing, so that any of you, if you really wanted to, could empower yourself to make your own machine and like really feel like you're going places and making progress. And I actually gave each of the 3 sculptures different names, so that when I called progress, because that was like the last one and the most elaborate. But I think the irony of the drawing and the piece in general is that you are empowered to kind of create the entire thing yourself from scratch without any prior knowledge of how to make these things. But ultimately, what you end up creating is very limited in what it can do. It's a little bit disappointing, and it requires so much maintenance to keep up. But it's kind of like, why did I go through all this effort? Because I'm not hearing the sign. Okay, so this is like a little 5-minute video. It's basically just documentation of the 3 sculptures that I made in this series back in 2020. And the reason I have this video at all is because it was a pandemic and I needed a way to document the pieces. So it's not really like this sophisticated arts film. It's really just a way to document the work. But while it's playing and you can see the visuals, I can give a little bit more context about the conceptual motivation of the work. So each of these sculptures explore relationships between circular and linear motion and how personal agency or positionality intersects with these linked mechanics. So personal agency, positionality, I see as both your decision to engage in the act of creating the thing as well as you controlling the little switches and the knobs that are moving the machine around. I was, and I still am in my current work, primarily or particularly interested in how larger systemic frameworks such as legal systems, science, and capitalism define and constrain the mobility or possibilities within subordinate systems. So, for example, within like our current justice system, where justice entails imprisoning the guilty, does achieving justice create more and more linear progress? We're always moving upward, or are we succumbing to a circular logic of violence by incarcerating the guilty? Because incarceration can be seen as a form of violence. So are we trying to solve violence with violence? Is this a circular thing, or are we, by putting people in jails, like moving up, reforming society or whatever? Also, in climate change and vaccination debates, ultimate appeals on both sides are to science. Everyone says science supports my position, but as we all know by now, science has many disguises or maps or channels that it comes through, and statistics tend to be very abundant and contradictory and can often be guided by people's career aims, where the money's coming from to support these studies, etc. And then finally, in the DIY or makerspace, many people championing like this break from corporate domination, enslavement, will ultimately end up achieving like their greatest success by selling their work or licensing their work to a larger company or becoming a larger company themselves. So all of these like garage businesses are like, F the man, and then they become like an even bigger behemoth of that. And so the machine of capitalism tends to produce the desire or the drive to escape it. And then the pursuit of this desire tends to reinscribe one within that thing that you were trying to escape. So desire and agency in the context of struggle for liberation or legibility of various kinds more generally can be viewed as relationships between circularity and linearity, where the degree and direction of linear movement or progress is both enabled and constrained by an underlying circularity. So obviously social media algorithms that are producing echo chambers and political polarization is also another example of this. And I guess what's really funny and ironic to me in the context of this show was the piece that's up there now, the physical piece that's moving, is like the third or fourth iteration of this actual sculpture, because this is like the first kinetic sculpture I ever made, period, and I had never heard of Arduinos before this, I had never worked with motors before this. So it was just like literally me tinkering, handwriting measurements, going on YouTube and watching videos that were made for 10-year-olds and like, how to make your first Arduino project. And so it's like the amount of effort and time and experimentation it took to build that machine, and then also the amount of time and effort and energy it takes to maintain it. Like I think Jamie was saying, she's had to replace the buttons and the switches on there like every few minutes, I guess every day, because they keep coming, people keep pulling them out. I think it's like ultimately when you watch the sculpture, all it really does is move back and forth a little bit, and the pieces that are within it just like they move like a little tiny, maybe centimeter or so, and really ultimately there's this huge demonstration of some like great motion, but nothing's happening and nothing's changing. And I used like red, blue, black, white, these kind of contrasting polarized binary colors to kind of indicate that it's a kind of circularity that creates the illusion of two sides, but it's really tied together. The only way that these things are created are that they're tied together by this kind of circular motor. But yeah, so ultimately, the kind of, I guess the punchline for me with this whole project was that like, there is a way for this machine to operate correctly, because obviously I've had to make this 4 times and now it finally works. But to maintain its correct, but basically it operating correctly just means it's doing what it's doing now, which is basically nothing. But at least it's not exploding and falling apart and all the pieces are going on the floor. And so it, to me, it's kind of a metaphor for we're so entrenched in this like political, economic, social matrix of a system where we're just caught in this loop of like just trying to keep that machine working the way it is, as opposed to really being able to conceive of breaking out of it, because we're just so used to that thing. It's so tangible, and we try to fix it for so long that we almost don't want to just take a hammer and find something else to use instead. Okay, so that's the end of the book. So the last, I don't know if I have time, but the last slide that I have is just of another piece that's kind of conceptually related that I made in 2021. And so this is called Solutions Tiebreakers. It's a little sculpture installation, I guess, that uses 1,300 pieces of litmus strips or litmus paper. And I think all of us have used this in high school for testing whether something's a basic. So one of the bases contains a baking soda or basic solution, and the other base contains an acidic, I think, vinegar-based solution. And basically the ties started out as one solid color, so either blue or red. And then when you put the tie in the opposing base, they change colors. And basically this is just presents another way of thinking about polarization or opposites and how we can conceive of the relationship between things that seem like they live in different worlds, but actually it's almost like the opposite contains itself, like it's other. So it's kind of like, this idea of difference or integration of differences. It can mean, it's just a different way to think about the relationship between two things. I guess that could be considered to be very different. So the reason I put I don't know if you recognize the lichen on the bottom, I guess it's called reindeer lichen. And I chose it because it was the closest to like a white shade, so I wanted it to be a kind of obvious, allusion to red, white, and blue. But the reason I included lichen is that litmus paper's color changing ability actually comes from lichen, which is like a hybrid fungi algae composite association. It's not even technically, I don't think, called an organism. It's almost like its own mutualistic symbiotic existence. So it's kind of fascinating to me that this binary testing tool that's either red or blue, that people think of as like on or off, red or blue, the ability of this litmus paper to change color actually comes from a very mutualistic symbiotic organism that is not one thing or the other. So it's kind of like, what can we learn from the fact that this binary indicator is able to have its binariness because of this mutualistic underlying, quality. So it kind of makes me think of, when I see someone now that I don't agree with, I'm like, am I actually containing you within me? And how are you just a reflection of things I'm not accepting within myself, or that I'm not recognizing? So hopefully that makes, I didn't really read my notes on that one, so I think I kind of went on a tangent, but hopefully that made sense. But yeah, so that's my overall, what I wanted to mention. And I guess there's questions.
Questions? Anyone have questions for Jenny? If not, we'll definitely have a Q&A at the end, so we'll move on to Chenhung. Thank you,
Can you hear me if I don't have to use this one less thing to deal with? Is it okay? I don't need to use the mic, right?
You try.
Okay. I'll just hold on. Okay. First of all, thanks Jason and Vojislav and Studio Channel Island to give me this opportunity. It's wonderful to be here. Today I would like to focus on just this body of work because I've been doing art for so many years. So, okay,
Sorry.
so that's okay. Today I focused on materials and concepts. So before talking about this body of work, let me give you just a little bit of the background where I came from. Do I have to click? Well, okay, there we go. This is the painting when I was, I produced at the end of college years. And so I have been dealing with art pretty much all my life. One of my happy memory is drawing and painting on the back of third grade, classroom. And there's a project, we pin a huge paper on the back of the room, and with different group of kids doing it. Most kids seems doesn't care much about it, but I persist and want to make it beautiful. And that was my kind of first happy memory. So as you can tell, so I went through very much mostly two-dimensional training, from calligraphy, Chinese ink painting, and of course watercolor drawing. Then in the college years, oil painting, acrylic, printmaking, all that stuff. So by the end of the college, this is pretty much my style of painting. And some people would say, oh, I would say it's a bit related to American abstract expressionism. And why is that? Because American abstract expressionism is very much influenced by the Asian art. So for me to go from the other way, relating back in, it makes no sense to me, right? So yeah, you can see a lot of linear elements in this. And the drawing quality and all that stuff is in it. So, and when it comes to cultural background, I'll talk about it a bit later on in the influence, in the other image that I will show you. So, I went to New York City for School of Visual Art for my graduate studies. So, this is the end when I come out of it. What it turned out to be is the completely three-dimensional. And the reason for that is like at the time I kind of feel like, oh, painting is dead. Like, how can you paint differently? It was so difficult. So since I have all this training, from both sides, East and West, but in the end, I feel like I should play with my material. It's just kind of, my work, painting is very linear. So I just took all the linear element and put it in either drawing on the wall, cut a hole in the wall, or see even that pile of paper and the rock, the paper had tic-tac-toe on top of it, and the piece of rock had all the strata different, the line, it would just naturally form from, like God. And so that really is, and also the influence of my instructors at the time, two of them, female artists, they are pretty famous now. They are all into like unusual material. So that very much influenced me. And of course, the wonderful New York City at the time. It was so different than now. So, so after the graduate school, this is the body of work. I work on it since see the picture on the left is the studio Channel Island. I had an inauguration show here, a solo show. So those are the pieces, the extension of the body of work. I call it entirety. So originally Greek philosophy is defined variously as the actualization of potential and the aging of that brings about the actualization. It's like that potential, how human beings everyone want to, develop their potential. And it's like a life journey that everyone have to go through. So, why do I use, maybe you want to ask, why do I want to use cable and wire? So, that was actually an accident. A friend of mine gave me a whole bunch of wires, and they kind of cleaned out the house when they're building house, all the industrial cables and wire, a whole bunch of stuff. So I guess this person saw my works that have a lot of linear quality with it. So I just have all the pile of stuff, put it in one corner of my studio for years, maybe at least a year and a half. And then one day it dawned on me. I even took inside all the copper wire out and crocheted some stuff, which is very different from this body of work. But this is like, I realized this is what I want to talk about, is that energy, using the cable, that symbolic meaning of energy that runs through all of us, right? Without energy, without the electricity, so-called. I mean, even my piece here, I didn't even plug in. It's like, I don't need to plug in. What I'm talking about is like, you can see the energy that's implied in the cable, even you don't plug it in. So that was my intention of that. And why entirety is like, we all need energy to run through us, to function, to live, to, So I developed a whole body of work based on that idea. And after a couple of years, then I developed into, at the time I was reading the I Ching, which is a classic in Chinese culture. So originally it was just really a book that people use it for fortune telling, and you want something you can consult with the spirit. But the book really fascinated in me, it's not because of the fortune-telling ability. There was all the different chapter and the possibility about 64 or in a certain period of time, then it developed into more. The amazing thing was this book talked about all the possibility human being can go through and what can happen to you. If you do this, this will happen. If you do that, that will happen. If you, there's, anyway, I don't want to talk about the book too much, but based on that book I was fascinated. It covered all human situation, and that's what we are. We are experiencing life and experience all the different circumstances in life, and how come it didn't really exceed all the 64 possibility or even more, And that was fascinating. How come this person can see through life so clearly? So that's fascinating. So the title I Ching in America is like, I grew up in Taiwan, but I'm here. And all the variation of life it can be. So, next. Okay, there is the variation of this body of work. So from sculpture, hanging, freestanding, and installation. So that's what a visual artist do. We try to explore all different variation of, for at least 30 years, my work is always talking about the same subject. So the same subject is that under that influence of that the culture I grew up from was basically had, let's say, Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism in that order that fused together harmoniously and create this society. If you have been to Taiwan or South Korea, they have some similarity. It's like very friendly, always, they always try to help you. They try to, like, in Taiwan, any foreigner come in, they treat foreigner better than their own people because they feel like you are the guest here. They want to treat you well. They want you to have a good time and have a nice experience. So I feel it's very much under that, those philosophies influence. So, okay, next. So, this is a piece I did, let me see how many years this gave me. So, it was like a residency, okay. Okay, it's a hand beach in Georgia. And this piece, at the time I feel like, I've been living in Los Angeles for so long, I do need some, like, reconnect with nature. My work is influenced by nature, but because the material I use so industrial. But the idea, so I went back there, tried to do a residency and spend 2 weeks to reconnect with nature. And I figured a hammock is perfect for that environment, so I did an installation there. And next, this piece is, again, the linear material, one is the casing in the back, the black thing is the casing of the table. And the green one is the tape. And the rest, some similarity, like the piece you have, you can see here, the casing of the cable and all kinds of stuff related to linear element. This is a residency I did at Torrance Art Museum, I think it's 2016, something like that. And this is another piece I did an installation at Lancaster Museum of Art and History. Again, similar subject, And but doing an installation is a bit more challenging than sculpture or drawing, just because you have to deal with gravity and the natural way of how to combine them together. And the basic technique of, you can see the black and white piece is crochet with cable and wire together to form this fabric-like shape, and I install it and arrange it on site. So, next. And this piece, so after that, and again, it's like I try to explore anything that I haven't do. So I figure this is a good way of another expression for the material. And I think this piece, it was like early 2015 started. I was having a garage converted into a studio. So my electrician, at some point, tried to install some track lighting. So he, during this, he was removing the old conduit and cables, and he was prepared to throw it out. And at that moment, you see the top part of the conduit with connection and another part. That was exactly that piece. He tried to throw it out. I said, no, I want this. This is perfect for my, in the future, I can use it. So, of course, at the time, I don't know what exactly, but you can see the work developed. Later on, you can see what I developed into. Sorry. Back? Yeah. So that's another piece in that spirit. And I try to develop a whole series of work here. Next. This is a commission piece. I think, let me see what years. It was, a piece commissioned by Hosa Technology Company in 2019 to produce a sculpture. So they are an import company for like, they deal with various type of cables for musical instrument and stereo systems. So they want me to make a piece of sculpture because they are doing in the NAN show, musical instrument. It was a huge show in Orange County. And so they want to make a piece to attract people's attention using their cables. So this is what I did. And during the most amazing thing is, during this process, I crochet with the cable, sort of build this armature of the thing. And then on the surface, I realized I gotta invent another way of weaving to attach the cable and wire together for the facade to create this sort of like a conch shape. And so at the time, I figured it out a different way of doing so. And the reason I mention that is that influenced the future pieces of the work I will be doing. I am doing now, and I did also. So this two pieces was, so the pandemic hit, right? And it gave me a chance to kind of reflect myself or my own being in the situation of I should confine myself at a certain space. So this is the work. I start to kind of examine the inside and the outside. So the inside of the cable energy was confined with the copper, even though they look like gold, but inside was copper that coated with kind of gold color. And in that situation, the variation of possibility of the kind of confinement in a way. And this piece is related to, at the time I was fascinated with the idea of, I took the cable, I took it apart and used the copper wire inside, crocheted out to cover the object itself. So it's like inside and outside relationship, and the kind of like inside is protecting the outside in a way. And that's another, from this view, you cannot see there's a piece of electronic inside, but it has. There's a piece of electronic inside. So it's based on the same concept. And then I sort of, after the pandemic, and I continue with the idea of the sort of relief using crocheting cable and some wire and related item, electronic item, and for this piece. And at the time, I was asking to do a show at the LAX United Air. So with their space, I can have drawing and installation, which I will show you later. And also they have some wall space. So I want to develop, see, earlier I showed you that piece of the conduit and wire. So that's where the idea of using the conduit and bigger wire as a frame for me to weave other cable inside it with sort of order and chaos, you see. The sort of circulated wire is more like orderly, and then the chaotic one. So this and this piece, all these pieces are now at the LAX United Air Terminal 7 right now. And also to weave the sort of more orderly wire, I do use that, the commission I had, the technique I sort of invented at the time. And I realized I can use it that way to hold all the cable together. So it combined with crochet and different way of weaving. And that's another piece, most current, probably 2023, I guess. Yeah. So next, yeah, this is still there. It will end this year sometime. In the installation, just because of the space they offer. And I kind of figure out what I can do with it. And there's, of course, limitation of it, but I think I did the best out of it, because they have to cover everything because the passenger go by and you cannot have anybody touch anything. So this is what I can make with.
Gorgeous.
Thank you. And this is the latest piece. It was at the Hollywood. Beverly Connection, the mall, somebody have a space empty, so I did an installation with 2 other artists there. So that's it.
Should we do Q&A for the?
We can do
Yeah,
Q&A
we'll do all the
later.
Q&A at the end.
Yeah, I think that's better.
Yeah. Okay, Ibuki.
Hello, my name is Ibuki Kuramochi. I'm a performance and a media artist. Came from Japan since 2019. So my works are based on Japanese Buto dance that incorporates digital art. Explores the human body through video, digital painting, and Japanese Buto dance. Highlights themes of mutability, transformation, and agency. So delves into the intersection of technology and the female body, prompts reflection on gender and identity. For my work, the important core is definitely the dance and the female body, my own. So the Buto dance, known as the Dance of Darkness, was founded by Tatsumi Hijikata and Kazuo Ono after World War II as a means of re-establishing Japanese cultural identity. Buto dance turned away from modernization and the Western dance styles and founded Buto on unknown principles such as philosophy, the subconscious, primitive instincts, and ancient incoherence. Sorry. And so this is my video. This comes with a sound or no sound?
Should do. It should.
It should. Okay. Cool. All right. So this is short clip on my video and performance. My video and the performance script. Also, this is my digital paintings. So that's come from my performance documents, like photography and videos. And I made lots of layers by Photoshop, so that I created this image. And talking about the artwork escapes as exhibiting over there on VR. So this work explores the ovulation process of the female body, intertwines elements of the body and technology with the myth of the cosmic egg. Cosmic egg symbolizes possibility and the birth of all things, reflecting dualities, creation, and metamorphosis. Ovum represents the cyclic nature of the female body and its reproductive capacity, bridging the organic and artificial. So the behind creating this work is definitely relating with the experience of my female body, especially the ovulation. During that time, I really having a tough time, and then I started taking the birth control pill. Then I felt that my body is like a very like systematized, kind of like it's very much close to the identity of kind of cyborg because of the whole like aggression and all the period of the system. It's I feel like in between organic and non-organic kind of feeling, and I incorporate in with that, and I put on metaverse. So this is a video of inside of the metaverse. Yes. In case you haven't experienced. So this is like a circle of the space. Putting my video art of the cycle. So if you wanna experience it, its whole environment experience with VR. Yes, so that's my work. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so again, after we're done with the Q&A and artist talk, we will turn everything back on and you will have an opportunity to actually put on the VR headset and play with the political machine and all the works. So we titled this talk Cyborg Surreality. And whether or not that applies to me, obviously, Ibuki, you mentioned that definitely that's part of your work has this cyborg element. But for all of you, what does the idea of cyborg surreality relate in some way to your work? The idea of a cyborg is that anything that is human also integrated with artificial, and that can be electronics, or it can be drugs, or it can be, like medicines, things like that. So, any of you have an initial response?
Yeah, I'll talk first. Yeah. See, my piece is not even plugged in. So, I mean, if I want to plug in, it's so easy. I'll just, find something to plug in and have light or this and that. But I try to emphasize that human relate to all the technology is still based on energy. If you don't have electricity, you got nothing. So, but that energy is still inside of us. So it's like human relate to it. We create something, we try to imitate, we make robot, we imitating something to make a robot, right? We create tools because, like for instance, a screwdriver. Because we cannot use it to do it with our finger, we had to create something, a tool, like the extension of our body to do something we want. It's like this tool, machine is the extension of our mind, really. So that's my take for it.
I don't think my work directly deals with those themes in the way that you might think an artwork would address certain things. But right when you asked the question, I really started thinking about the kind of aspirational energies within like cybernetics, the idea of a cyborg, like hybridizing. I think we were just talking about AI making us and our consciousness last forever. These aspirations that we have for our combination with the technology that we use, as well as surrealism was also this kind of radical move to try to like break from the constraints of rationality, and it was sort of had this forward moving, we're gonna make progress, we're gonna break through, leave the old systems behind. So I think in my work, it kind of resonates with that aspirational, the ironically self-entrapping aspirational quality of those two things converging together, where the more we try to escape something with a new technology, the more we realize even the desire to escape comes from the old. And so we have to completely alter our consciousness in a different way in order to reconceptualize what even our problem or the experiences or what our goals are. So I guess in that broad sense, it relates to me.
Anything else you want to say, Ibuki, about the cyborg?
Yeah, for me, cyborg is a very strong inspiration. Especially, I really love the paper from Dana Haraway, Cyborg Manifest, that came out in 1985. It's a very fascinating paper talking about cybernetics, and also the paper is talking about the not only the cyborg is not like the image of like the Terminator, like it's very much more like super autonomous identity for me. Especially like when I do performance, becoming a different character, like doing the Buto dance is completely like the identity of otherness. So I really love the using technology into my work, push the more critical thinking, especially doing the body of physicality goes to very much of essentialism of like physicality. So the technology, the cyborg idea is very strong identity for pushing more critical thinking.
Any questions from the audience?
I have one for Chen.
Yeah.
One of your painted art, which is displayed at the Lax Terminal, the big one. So it says like Draupadi Sari. What inspired you to keep that name?
Oh, yeah. I was always interested in different culture, from Indian. Even a while ago, we were watching Vikings movie because I was so curious about the history at the time. So Draupadi Sari is a story in the Mahayana.
Ramayana.
Right. I don't pronounce it correctly,
Okay.
but yeah. So all the stuff fascinates me because I really like we're all human beings, but we have different culture, different languages, different food. but they all made similar ingredient, and that's what's, and the story itself of Draupadi, how she got derobed by the person. If you want to know the story, you can Google. But anyway, that story really fascinating. Yeah, and because her master saved her at the time, and so that's fascinating story. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I know the story. I'm Indian. Like I know this whole story of Ramayana. So when I saw the name, like I was like, oh, what prompted you to keep that name? Like
Yeah, it is that when I read that story, because I'm just interested in all different cultures, and I try to find a commonality in different cultures, and I found that there is like it's all human stories, and it's very relatable. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, how as artists do you get from point A to point Z at any given time? I imagine, it changes, but you can use either the example of this show or something else. Like, how do you go from that idea, working with materials, what you discover along the way, to the final thing? How do you know it's done?
Okay, I can talk.
Yeah.
For me, it's like, okay, I have something. I sometimes I just crochet for no reason, and then I'll hang it up, take it down, hang it up, take it down, look at it every day, and then it could turn into something or not. It's all spontaneous. I'm very focused on the process, probably because my way of life, the Asian Taoism, the way of life. It's just even the crochet itself for me is very meditative. So it's really true. Sometimes I have things I don't know how to deal with myself at a certain point, and I started crocheting, and the worry just went away, and I made something. And it could turn into something else or not. So in that process, very enjoyable and very calming.
Well, with respect to that piece in particular, because it was one of the first pieces I made in grad school like 4 years ago, I think it's kind of funny. Maybe this is probably way too much information, but this is how my brain works. So I actually had an addictive eating disorder when I was a teenager, and it kind of allows you to numb your feelings for as long as you engage in that behavior, and then once you decide to deal with it, all of those feelings that you had from whenever you started the numbing process, they all come back, even if it's 30 years later. So in a sense, like the way that I went about making that work in retrospect, when I reflect on that, it's kind of like I was always like a little tinkering, craft making, artist girl. I was always called the artist in elementary school, but growing up in an immigrant family, first generation, it's kind of like you don't get to be an artist, you gotta focus on other things. So I really put that on the shelf from around the age of 11 or so, and then came back to it in my late 30s and 40s. And so it's almost like the same thing. I returned to the same state that I was of curiosity and like little kid tinkering that I was when I stopped it. So in a sense, those little wooden materials, the little Arduinos, the 10-year-old YouTube videos, it's almost like me revisiting that very essential aspect of who I was that I put on a shelf. So for that project in particular, that's kind of how I went about making it. And I thought it was done 4 years ago, and then Jason wanted to put it in. So it was like another opportunity to, rethink how to make it quote unquote work, even though it doesn't do anything. So it's an interesting overall journey.
Yes, for me, it comes from my physical body work. My body is definitely like the regular body is very inspiration and the concept. Definitely, the concept is important to create the artwork. The SSD and making the performance, I always making the sketch, especially my artist background came from the painter. So the making sketch and making the images, even the costumes first is a very important process for me.
I have a question. This is more of a philosophical one. I'm just curious for your thoughts. When we talk about technology, we're talking about it's the easy way is to look at, you plug it in, you have the wires, you have the electricity flowing, it's mechanical, it's something we create. But then even in your performance through the Busho, you were also talking about, well, I took that pill and it started to modify my body, right? And so you're doing that from a cybernetic. So when you look at technology and you really try to get the boundary of what that means, it thins, right? Because all of a sudden you could argue that that's technology. You could argue that the energy flowing through the body is a form of technological basis. So I'm curious, can you have human narrative through art that is fully divorced from technology when you really try to understand what technology means?
So the question was like dualism of human and body?
I think if you really try to drill into the definition of what technology is, are we able to have human narrative without technology in its purest form?
It's a great
That's a good question.
Wow.
Give us a week to think about
No, it really comes top of mind. It's
Insane
not. I
about
just because you're all talking about, I think, this type of thing and the art that you're doing, but it's obviously like a big question with no firm answer.
Singing.
The what?
Singing.
Singing.
Yeah.
Well, our vocal
Well,
cords
that's
could be
a
a technology.
technology.
Well, you can say breathing is technology too. I mean, you can define anything as technology.
That's my point. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
But
I
you
guess
can
that's
also
the
define
question
it as
for
not technology.
linguists to determine the meaning of the
Yeah,
word.
maybe it was
But
more.
I do
wordy.
think that technology is part of humanity. That's what makes us humanity. When we started to make tools, even though there are a bunch of animals using variety of the tools that they are even creating,
Yeah.
but that's kind of really separating us from the. I guess that would. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's a good point. When Peter had said a technology is the theme of the show, I mean, of course, the first things that come to mind are electronics. But my piece, for example, I knew that aside from Chenhung's and Vojislav's, we wanted a few things that would work without them needing to be powered. So mine was about the technology of the human nose and or the senses in general, because we wanted to create a multi-sensory experience. And actually there was an artist who does olfactory sculptures, but she was unavailable. And I was like, well, I really want smells in the show. So I just made mine smell as a result. But, it is interesting. Do you have other comments about maybe in relation to that it sparks for your work?
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting too because, we have fiber-based work in the show, and you might not think fiber technology, but how would we weave without the machines that we have today, the sewing machines and all that stuff? We're very dependent. I mean, but you're crocheting, and that is technology, but that's simple.
The computer was invented, in the beginning was for weaving. Because of that.
Industrial
So
revolution.
yeah, exactly. So it go back to what I just said earlier. Human being, we invent screwdriver because our finger couldn't do that. So it's an extension of our body and mind. And that's just part of human nature. So that's how I see it.
I think that's how I see it too.
Yeah.
And I was just curious to see if that sparked any thoughts. That's where I will get stuck to. It kind of feels like it's an extension. And not that would defeat or diminish the concept of being human, but just that seems like it's sort of interwoven into our existence now. And I think that's a really interesting conversation, which I think you each touched on in your own way for your art. Yeah.
Yeah, my work is, I really like, the reason why I started the metaverse is I was in the metaverse residency, and I was curious about how could I plant my physical into the metaverse. And it's very interesting that if you go to a metaverse world, then I really noticed I use a GIF file a lot. First I created a performance of my video work, then I changed to a GIF. And if you go to metaverse, then you see get close to the metaverse, you see a very much of dots of GIF. I felt like it's very much of a guts of the kind of human, a guts of the kind of digital nature in the environment. I was so excited and started branding my physical body into the metaverse. So yeah, right now it's very or everybody has the questioning about technology, especially AI is very, very rapidly spreading all around. So, and eventually maybe we really don't need our organic, kind of body, our existence is very curious in the future. We artists also, how could our artwork value, especially the AI is gonna taking over everything. The NFT artists are making a lot of AI arts, so they are selling it. So I was really curious about how could our open painting has a value in the future. But for me, it's very important to coming back to physicality, that we have our own that the AI doesn't have. So that's why I'm doing the Buddha dance to explore my physical.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, I guess just to say something about this question, I think for me when I ask questions now, because I've taken classes in so many things in my life, and all I'm doing is answering questions and writing papers and things like that. And so now I really think about I also find the question compelling, but when I ask questions now, I think about where's the juice or the energy, the center of gravity of the question, what is it driving towards? There's something very interesting in thinking about the liminality or the boundary, but what am I pursuing through that interest? Because you could easily lapse into a generalization. Oh, it's technology. Okay, moving on. And then you lose what you were seeking. So I kind of like to stay in that searching energy and not to so easy. And this is kind of a tangent also, but in thinking about the machine and what it means to break the system or resist the system and build a new one, I kind of don't like these sweeping gestures of I don't know. It's these kind of sweeping generalizations are over. Let's just all love each other and that's it. And it's it just doesn't. There's a reason why we are having all of these experiences and all these tensions. There's something richer there, and I think that's what gravitates. What we gravitate to as artists is kind of expressing and exploring that. So I think for me, I can't really answer your question, but I want to maintain the tension of the question as opposed to just trying to answer it conceptually. So I guess I'll leave with it like that.
That's honestly why I asked, is to challenge the notion and to be I think it's an interesting area that I don't have an answer to. I don't know if there is an answer, but I love hearing other artists' perspectives on that space. So I love that answer. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. I do actually have many questions, but I'm gonna just stick with one for Ibuki and one for you, and then I have a lot of questions. So in this era when we see that the technology is rapidly changing, every 6 months every software is updating, you kind of have to learn all of this stuff. As much as we would love for those things to exist in 10 years from now, metaverse might disappear, explode, or whatever. How you see preservation of your work for the future, since it's really dependent on on this platform. There it's just a private investment. We have no clue what's gonna happen with Twitter. That was the very recent this tumbling, changing game of that. So how you see this metaverse developing in the future?
Metaverse, the mostly right now the people are using for gamers. Like I was in an opening, then the person that familiar with Metaverse was a kid, so they are playing the games. So also the people are collecting NFTs, exhibiting the artwork in the Metaverse. So I believe that they will be developing for sure. They're more like artworks in the Metaverse for sure, and NFT as well. It's completely different context of like artwork in the Metaverse, it's definitely related in contemporary art field, but I feel like it's pretty much different context. So I really love both environments, and I really love the combine together. So yes, definitely it's developing.
But like in 10 years from now, will this piece be like a piece that you created in 2024 and it's supposed to be always seen through these goggles, or you see this developing like, if it's transportable to some other platform?
Yeah, actually this piece was created based on XR editor. So XR is close reality, so it's relating the physical space as well. So it's like a VR needs the global. So from 10 years, probably we don't need a goggle anymore.
No?
So like AR needs QR code, but AR like getting very familiar with that, like especially phone is getting very So like VR is also like no needed goggle, I guess.
Great, thank you. Well, then the next question about accumulation of the materials is like, you have so many of those wires everywhere. We have some for you to keep.
Thank you.
Yeah, so how about this accumulation? You're like living in a time when there is so much waste around us, and like you can use that to create those beautiful, this exhibition at LAX is like beyond, it's just so amazing. So, and you can use colors, you can use like all these beautiful elements. How you feel about that? You never go to the art store and buy art supplies, you just go and pick them up. How that works for you?
Yes, I was living in the brewery for a while, so people just gave me stuff, which is a bit similar to this situation. People have studio, but they live there also. So I know a lot of people, and of course, in this day and age, I wouldn't take things from stranger because how to yeah. So I still accumulate a lot of stuff at home and I reuse them also. From this installation to that installation, I reuse them and make new things to add to it or this and that to make different pieces. That's how I do it. Otherwise, it's like you're living with all the junk. Sometimes it's a bit too much. But of course, roll everything up, put it in the boxes, plastic boxes, and put it in the bag.
But that's why you also distinct what is installation and what is the sculptural piece. Because the sculptural piece has to be preserved in the way that it is, but the installations are kind of like more
flexible.
Flexible
Yes.
and like possible to install in different shows.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, sculpture have to preserve in a different way. Yeah, but it's a new problem for me actually. Those are still at the airport now. I don't have to deal with it until they come back.
Nice.
So,
but it's really environmentally consciousness. It's something that it's really beautiful.
Thank you.
And yeah, Jennie. So for you, my big fear was like technology show is like something is not gonna work or work. was all when we curate, we like to have productional curation, which means that people will bring their own works, completely new works for the show. But your work was so fitting originally, and then like that was the biggest kind of like fear: is it gonna work or not? But then I also tend to think that basically this is the part of the work. This is the part of the experience.
At this point.
So how can you explain a little bit that situation for audience?
Yeah, it's funny. I think in the beginning you were saying like in 10 to 15 years, like what will your work be? I'm like, I have no idea if it'll even be intact. Or like, what does it mean when it's done? Like, I don't, it's funny. Like in a sense, you can take the model and make 1,000 more, and they'll presumably work quote unquote perfectly, but they'll still not really do anything and just take up more space. But I think overall, it was just really a process of trial and error. I don't even remember the very first thing that I did, or like how I decided what materials I used. I think at that time, because it was so early in my thinking about all the different pieces of making an artwork, and my particular personal orientation to it, I was just so focused on, making a kinetic sculpture work. So, I think the aspect of it not working was never intentional in the way that it doesn't work, like people pulling the buttons off. I guess there are, you can solder those pieces on, but I didn't get a solderable board, and I don't have a solder gun, so it's kind of, it is what it is. But I think as Jason was commenting, the fact that it can be taken apart in so many ways accidentally by so many people, and then it constantly has to be monitored and maintained like a little, an infant that can, help itself. It just really adds to the comical irony of the whole contraption. It's kind of like, this is exactly what it feels like to live in a society where we're all consciously and unconsciously trying to keep this shared machine operating, even when each of us knows it's totally broken. It really, maybe it'll last 5 more minutes, maybe 5 more years, like we don't know. But it has that quality of that feeling of like a little anxiety. Just kind of lives in that machine, I guess. It's like a mirror for that.
Yeah, I truly love that it's like offering that like duality, but it's like it's breaking apart, and it's like we are more than that duality. So great, thank you.
Okay, well, we want to have the next, they close at 3. We want to turn everything back on to give you a chance to explore, find out for yourself that it's about making discoveries. But we really want to thank particularly Peter and Jamie of Studio Channel Islands for this opportunity. And our 3 artists on the panel today, Jennie, Chenhung, and Ibuki. Thank